Right, hello everyone, welcome back to a hopefully long-awaited video. I haven't really uploaded anything recently, mostly due to a lot of the officials that I was playing in my last team before I stopped as a player. My last efforts to make that work, but anyway, we're back with some more content. So, I put this article out a couple of weeks ago now, and it went down really well. I was really happy with the feedback that I got on it, so I appreciate anybody that did give me any. But this could be potentially quite a long video, so I'm going to try and get through it as quickly as I possibly can do. And essentially what it's going to be is just a summary video for this whole article, in which I tried to analyze the nature and, as the title says, the impact of support play when it's done properly by the teams at the top level, or at least done as well as it is being by the teams at the top level, whether that's properly or not. And I wanted to have a look at support play because, to me, it makes Valorant Valorant. It's what sets it apart as a top tier esport. The complexity and the necessity of good quality, of high quality supportive team play, is what makes it so great to analyze, and it's also what warrants a really professional approach to analysis in general, and analytics, and a view on performance that I want to see grow more through the industry. Now, I split the article into 4 sections. This is a great quote, by the way. If anybody's interested in it, go and read that book by James Kerr. Split into 4 sections here, each of which is a different way of measuring success. It's not necessarily an exhaustive list of all the ways in which you can measure success, but it's just a few ways that I chose. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down each one, try and give you the sort of the key points of the argument and the conclusions, the takeaways, and then just move on to the next. So the first one, how the number of assists affects success. So what I was looking at here is essentially just how the total number of assists a team can get correlates with their the final successes that they see. I measured those by round win percentage and their total rounds won. So assists are obviously a result of helping your teammates get a kill, but that means that there's some level of success that you're reaching, but it doesn't necessarily mean that just because you have more assists than the other team that you're more likely to succeed. So you could still lose a game and have higher assists than the opposition team, simply because of the fact that they've killed you and have twice as many kills. They just didn't need as much team play support to do it. So to find whether or not assists are a useful indicator of success, what I wanted to do was average the team's assists across all of the playoff stage of Masters 1, and then divide that number by the number of rounds they play to give me their APR, their assists per round, because this is then a value that I can use to actually start comparing the teams. And this gave me a few interesting results. So you can see the graphs here, and you've also got the graph here of the team's actual APR values, their rounds won and their round win percentage. But what this gave me was a couple of takeaways. So the first of all is the teams that play in ways that heavily focus on creative utility usage, so your DRX, your PaperX, your Optic Gaming, they do have higher APR values. You can see that here on the graph. But they've got differing results. DRX came third, I think, in the end, and PaperX came fourth, with actually DRX may have came lower. I think either fifth, sixth, with PaperX coming in fourth and Optic Gaming obviously winning the event. So there was quite a range of results in terms of their eventual success there. And you can also see that there's a significant difference between their round win percentages and their total rounds won as well. So it suggests that actually just because a team has a higher APR doesn't necessarily mean that they have the highest performance. Secondly, even if that is the case, all of the teams that performed at a high level, i.e. these top 6 here, so not including Liquid and Guard, did score an APR value of 1.2 or more. Meaning that whilst the teams with the lower APR may have had those results simply because they couldn't get kills rather than down to their style of play, so to speak, there seems to be a sort of minimum APR value that you need to get to have a certain level of success at this highest level. And that seems to be about 1.2 APR. Now, once you get past that minimum, it doesn't really seem to make much of a difference. So once you hit that level and you get above that threshold, that even the teams with 1.2 APR, so you look at, or above that minimum, you look at someone like G2 Esports, 1.23 APR, are only going to be getting a very few number, probably 3 or 4 less assists than maybe the team with the top APR, Paper Rex 1.39, across a normal length map. So there's not really much of a difference between once you get above this threshold, or this minimum of APR value, between the actual number of assists that teams are getting. So it shows that once you hit that minimum, how you implement your playstyle, how you get those assists is actually way more impactful than purely the number of assists that you get. Okay, so moving on to the second section, how cast percentage of support players affect success. So this method of measuring support play, I wanted to use it because it incorporates other aspects of support, slightly more holistic view than just looking at the APR. And it's because cast percentage obviously includes your kills, assists, survive, or ability to survive rounds, and your traits. So it looks at the impact that a player can have in a slightly broader way. Now, what did this throw up? Well, it had a couple of interesting results. The first one was Team Liquid. They obviously had a really high cast percentage, but little success. Whereas other high cast percentage teams like your Optic, Zeta Division, etc., did have success. So I wanted to try and find an explanation for it. And to me, it seems like the difference might be in the role that the assists play in having a high cast percentage. Because you look at the difference between the APR values of these teams. Obviously, Liquid was really low, whereas these teams had a much higher APR. So it suggests that actually having a high cast percentage is good, but only if it includes sort of a high number of assists, or your assists really contribute to that high cast percentage for an individual player or for the team. Now, another result that stood out was Loud here. Loud's obviously had quite a relatively low cast percentage, but finished second at the event. So I was confused between, right, well, this obviously suggests that there's quite a strong correlation between winning rounds and having a high cast percentage average, which is sort of what you'd expect, but why is Loud so low? So my working theory for this is that actually their success is not down to having a high cast percentage, but actually due to the very low variation. This was something that I spotted when looking through the tables of the stats, was actually the top teams are the ones that have the lowest variation between the average cast percentages of their players. So if you look at Paper Rex, Loud, Optic, Zeta, all of their players' cast percentage averages fit between, in Paper X's case, a 3.4% range. And on the worst case for Optic, a 9.43% range. So all of the best teams, the most successful teams, actually had a variation between their players' average cast percentages of less than 10%. Whereas on the other hand, the Guard, G2, Team Liquid, and DRX were all obviously 14% or higher. So it suggests to me that actually that the variation in the cast percentages of players in your team is actually more strongly correlated or positively correlated with the success that you are likely to get as a team. Okay, now third section, how the amount of support utility affects success. This was a tough one because I went through 12 VODs, all the VODs from the playoffs, twice each, and counted every single bit of support utility used by any player on either team, and it all had to be done manually, and so I cannot tell you how long that takes. But was it worth my time? Let's hope so. Anyway, to the relevant things. From these games, it was clear that the top teams aimed to use 8 to 10 pieces of utility in a pistol round, and on buy rounds it was about 12 to 14, suggesting that there is probably a sweet spot for teams to aim for. However, it was only the teams that played slightly slower that were actually able to get the value out of all 12 plus pieces of utility that they had, that had the most success. So they weren't really using their util as fast as possible and just chucking bits out to try and just get their numbers up. But instead, teams like Optic and Loud were slowing down their playstyle, Zeta Division to an extent as well, during the rounds in order to make sure that they could get more supportive util out, but in a way that was actually valuable. So they weren't looking to throw away their lives, they weren't looking to just get the util out if you aim as a team to get your numbers up in terms of the amount of your support utility used, it's not going to be useful if you're not getting any value off the back of it. A flash thrown is not useful unless it's in support of a teammate. A smoke used just for the sake of it is not actually gonna get anything. So I made sure to count just the util that was being used, that was actually being used in a way that was deemed valuable for another teammate. And finally, how does the death of a support player affect the success of a team? Now, this measurement was used to try and track the impact that losing the opportunity for support the support player would provide has on success, and therefore its potential for impact when the support players are alive. Now, in order to measure this, I used Run It Back's impact rating stats and averaged the values for both the individual players and then the team as a result, just like I did with the cast percentages. Now, the first notable result of these findings was that actually the placements of the teams correlated positively and strongly with their average impact, and the change, specifically the change in the likeliness of the round win percentage. And so it appears that actually the teams that have support players with higher potential for impact usually do better. You've got a team like Paper Rex that focus really heavily on their duelist players, the Forsaken, Jing, actually doing worse because their impact is coming in the duelists rather than in their support players, unlike Optic, who did significantly better. However, it's not always the case, because it's important to note that if a team is unable to capitalize on this potential for impact, in this case it's Zeta division, then they're going to lose out to a team that can, which in these playoffs was Loud. Loud had a lower overall average impact of support players. However, when they were alive, they were actually able to capitalize on it more, and that was what led them to better results. So, as a result, somewhat obviously, it seems it's more important to focus on actually making the most of the value that you can get out of your support play, rather than necessarily just looking to have the highest average total. Now, what can we take away from this whole thing? This is the last section here. This is probably the TLDR of the whole thing. If you can't bother to read it all, then just go and read this. And I'll try and keep each point as succinct as possible so it's easy to retain, but essentially I'll just be reading from here. It's that many of the most successful teams at this event had a high APR, irrelevant of the style of play that they used. But beyond it, how they actually implemented their style of play was more important at determining how successful they were going to be. Secondly, high cast percentages for support players are important, but only if their assists form a significant contribution to this cast percentage. Thirdly, the equal impact of support players is more likely to help a team succeed than having one or two players who raise the team's average cast percentage. That's the variation. Having a smaller variation in cast percentage between your support players as possible correlates more as a stronger indicator of your potential success. Now, there also appears to be an optimum amount of utility to use in a round. The teams that played at a pace and in a style that accommodated this saw the most success. Finally, the ability to convert support players' potential impact into real impact is likely more important than having a team of support players that have the potential to have a greater impact overall, yet aren't able to actually realize that game. Now, I hope you've enjoyed going through this with me. As I said, the article did come out quite a while ago now, but I do hope to now make some videos to accompany any other outstanding articles I've written before I move on to content more relevant to my current role. See you all in the next one.